The new Zhiyun Weebill 3S seems great on paper, but how does it really compare to the Weebill S in real world usage? Let's find out. Hey guys, Huang here, and today we are looking at the new zhiyun Weebill 3S. So I've had this gimbal for a little over 3 weeks now, and I wanted to hold off on making a review until I was actually able to use this in real world scenarios, not just walking down a sidewalk or, doing something super casual. I wanted to actually put it to the test. So I actually took this thing to 2 weddings and also did a real estate video with this gimbal. And here are my thoughts about the Weebill 3S versus the original Weebill S.
Yo, this thing is solid. This thing is super solid. Super excited to be using this for the first time. It definitely feels a lot more stable than the Weebill S, given this is the 3S, so I mean, should be an upgrade.
So the Weebill S, which I now have in front of me, is a gimbal that I've been using for over 3 years and has been through tons and tons of weddings, trips, events, like you name it. Like, this thing has really been through a lot. And honestly, I love the Weebill S, and that was why when it died after I was using it in a wedding in the rain, I wanted to replace it by buying another Weebill S, but then I saw that they had just released the Weebill 3S and I thought I'd give it a shot. So here we are. First off, before I dive into the real world comparison, I just wanted to give you a quick comparison of the actual gimbals themselves and kind of what I like about the Weebill S versus the Weebill 3S. In terms of design, they're very similar. As you can tell, they're fairly similar in size. The Weebill 3S is a little bigger. The grips are designed differently. As you can tell on the Weebill S here, it has this fixed back plate thing that's kind of sticking out that you could put this handle on to give you that grip to be able to go into undersling mode and all of that really easily. And for me, in real world usage, when I'm walking around with the gimbal, I find it very useful just to be able to hold it like this, because it feels a lot more natural than walking around and holding it like this the whole time, because this takes a toll on your arms, whereas this is kind of like resting it, kind of like how you would carry a bag or something like that if you were carrying something heavy around. Comparing it to the Weebill 3S, which does have this handle grip here, it's not placed in the same way the Weebill S one is, which was up here. This one is actually much lower on the gimbal, and it does have an extension which you can twist here to make it longer, to make it sort of feel closer to this, but it's not nearly as high as the grip on the Weebill S. So that kind of comes into play a little bit too when you're holding the gimbal. It feels a little different when you're doing this on the Weebill 3S versus on the Weebill S. The other direct comparisons are that the grip itself on the Weebill 3S is definitely a lot more firm, and it feels a lot more high quality than the Weebill S, which feels a little bit of a cheap plastic feel here. So another difference between the two is they now replaced the batteries that you have in the Weebill S, where you could actually take them out and replace them. Now they're built into the gimbal itself, which is a pro and a con. It's nice just being able to charge the gimbal without having to worry about taking the batteries out and all of that. You just plug a USB-C cable into the gimbal and it'll start charging. However, the downside is that now if you're out traveling or if you're at an event like a wedding, for example, that can be fairly long, the batteries, just being able to swap them out was really, really nice. Being able to carry a spare pair of batteries and not having to worry about charging and all of that. Now it's a little different where you don't have that ability to swap the batteries out. You have to actually physically charge the gimbal. The motors in the Weebill 3S are stronger than the motors in the Weebill S, so that is a nice upgrade as well, and they do definitely feel much sturdier, and the gimbal just feels good in your hands. I will say one thing that they did change that I really love is the locks that they have for the axes here on each of the sides. The one on the Weebill S, like, it was great, especially compared to the original Weebill Lab, but there were times where like it just doesn't feel super duper secure. The ones on the Weebill 3S, like when I lock it, it feels secure. And I'm like, okay, we're good. It's not going anywhere. Nothing's moving. Like, it's solid. So let's talk real world usage. You can design the best gimbal on paper and it can look fantastic and you can have some nice cosmetic changes, but if it doesn't perform well in the real world, then it's not worth it. I took the Weebill 3S with me to 2 different weddings and to a real estate shoot, and basically here are my thoughts on actually using this thing for real events. As far as general build quality, it being able to handle being in my bag when I'm running around or just hitting things accidentally, whatever, this thing does feel a lot more solid. So let's turn this around here real quick. The grip on the Weebill 3S. I will say that this wrist guard here, that kind of just allows your wrist to rest on it when you're holding it like this. Basically your wrist can rest on the bottom of it, and it alleviates some of the pressure. It's definitely helpful. I won't say it's the most groundbreaking thing of all time, but it definitely does help your wrist out and alleviate some of the pressure off of holding a fairly heavy rig that you're carrying around for extended periods of time. So in addition to this wrist guard, the handle here does move to the side. So in addition to underslung mode, you can do the side grip, which allows you to grip the gimbal side by side with two different hands, and that gives you a lot more stability when you're moving around and you're doing your shots and all of that. It gives you a lot more smooth movement than what the Weebill S could do, which was basically only the underslung mode option. And in order for you to do all the different gimbal movements, your hands are in a slightly awkward position. So being able to move the handle definitely gives you some extra additional control over your movements. So the layout of the controls on the Weebill 3S, I have not gotten used to it yet. I will say the joystick and record and all that stuff, it's basically where your thumb is. And while it's not in an unintuitive location, the way you hold the gimbal, for me, being able to use this joystick actually in ways that would be meaningful when I'm walking with the gimbal, it doesn't feel like it's in the most natural spot where I'm trying to get super subtle movements with my thumb and also be maybe moving around and stuff like that. And the way the joystick is positioned, I don't really know if I feel like it's in the best possible spot. That being said, that might just be a personal preference type thing, but I will say that it felt a little different than the Weebill S, where the control was on kind of this center column here. And while this wasn't also that intuitive either, I will say just being able to hold the gimbal and move my thumb like this. I don't know if you can tell here, just moving my thumb like this versus out here on the Weebill 3S, I think, in my opinion, feels a lot more natural on the Weebill S. So that's one thing I do miss about that. So honestly, the thing I missed the most about the Weebill S versus the Weebill 3S, and the thing that just I noticed right away, is on the Weebill S, when you connect your camera to the gimbal, you can actually flip through the menu with using the scroll wheel here and actually control your aperture, your ISO, your shutter speed, and all of that. And it's fairly intuitive. Like, you just kind of click left and right to flip through the different things, and then you can just go ahead and you can control all of that just using the scroll wheel. On this, you can only configure this front rolling wheel where your pointer finger is right here, and that can only be one thing at a time. For example, ISO. You can also configure it though to do other things like zoom, focus. You can configure to tilt the camera so you can actually use it to do movements. But I like to use it, especially when I'm doing weddings and events, to control either ISO or shutter or whatever I need, aperture, just because sometimes lighting and things like that change really, really quickly. And I like just being able to, at the, turn of a knob, being able to adjust my settings as opposed to having to go up here and change it on the camera. However, I cannot change all of those settings quickly. I can only do one thing at a time, basically. And then I would have to go into the menu, change what this knob can set, and et cetera, et cetera. It's definitely not as intuitive as the Weebill S, and you don't have as much control directly. Honestly, that's the feature I miss the most, of just being able to control everything from the gimbal very, very quickly instead of having to go up here and change the different knobs and all of that. The Weebill 3S does have this neat little feature as well that I believe they got from the Crane M3 here, which is this light that's built into the side of the gimbal. And you can go ahead and you can turn that on by holding this button on the side, and the light will turn on. And for low light situations, if you're vlogging at night, if you're out at a wedding and you're filming during a reception, like basically situations where you don't have a lot of light, this is a lifesaver without having to attach a light to your gimbal or to your camera and then balancing that and all of that. This gives you that extra light that you would need. It's also fairly bright. It really does add a lot of light, and if you're ooh, if you're vlogging or something like that, you can tell it's bright. It's honestly kind of hard to look at when it's just at full power, but at the lower settings and stuff like that, it definitely gives you a bit of light, and you can definitely use that to go vlog, to do whatever you need, you know, etc., etc. So it's definitely a nice plus. If you're familiar with the Weebill S, the Weebill 3S does carry over pretty much most of the features. I think the things that really make it stand out are the light and the grip. Aside from that, most of the other features you can find on pretty much any other gimbal. And again, this grip with the wrist ability here, you can actually configure this by twisting this little knob, and you can see it's actually raising this wrist guard or lowering it, etc., to find basically what makes you feel comfortable. It's definitely nice, and it definitely alleviates pressure off your hand. So by default on the Weebill S, the grips here, you have to screw them in, which can be a pain, especially if you're trying to be quick. And then they do have this quick release mount that you can go ahead and buy. It's, again, additional money. But on the Weebill 3S, the grips here do come with this little lever, and then you can go ahead and you can actually just pop this out. So if you don't need the whole grip system, or you just need to go real quick, you can actually see that this is actually a very small gimbal, relatively speaking. It's fairly compact, has a lot of capability in and of itself. And then if you wanted to go ahead and plug this back in, you can just go ahead and slide this right onto the grip, lock this here, and you have your full grip system back in place. So the Weebill S versus the Weebill 3S. In short, I think that the Weebill S here is still a super solid gimbal. I think it has basically all the features that I would need in a gimbal, and for being how compact and light and just amazing that this, you know, this gimbal is, and for the price point, very, very affordable gimbal. So if you already have a Weebill S, I think that if you don't have a need for the light, or you aren't really suffering with carrying the weight around, for example, needing this wrist rest here, then I think that the Weebill S is still super solid, and I don't see a need to upgrade. That being said, the Weebill 3S, if you are looking for a Weebill S upgrade, if your Weebill S is getting old or dying, if you are tired and fatigued of carrying around a gimbal all day, and you could benefit from the wrist rest here, or you could benefit from the light for events and other things, of just having the ability to turn a light on, you know, at a whim, or you just need stronger motors than the Weebill S, then I will say that the Weebill 3S is worth considering. I think that ultimately, all in all, the Weebill 3S is better than the Weebill S. It does seem like a nice upgrade, but I will say, again, some of the features that it does have, like the Weebill S, the ability to quickly change between settings using the scroll wheel on the front of it, changing your aperture, your shutter, your ISO, whatever, honestly was my favorite thing about the gimbal. And either maybe I haven't figured it out yet on this gimbal, or it just doesn't have that feature anymore. And that was honestly one of the things I missed the most about it. But aside from that, everything else feels like a solid upgrade. This wrist rest here is really nice. However, I will say about the wrist rest real quick, this wrist rest, it has this rubbery material on it. And that material gets dirty very quick. Just rubbing off against your skin or other things, it's kind of a sticky material. So I will say that I don't see this being very clean or fresh, new looking, whatever, for very long. I could see it also getting kind of ripped up. So I can't speak to the long-term durability of the wrist rest itself. I'm a little afraid about it, to be honest. For the time being, I think it's you know, it's definitely helpful. But that being said, I don't know how it's going to hold up long term. But yeah, all in all, I think that the Weebill 3S is a solid gimbal. I think the Weebill S is a solid gimbal as well. I think that most people shouldn't need to upgrade from the Weebill S. Because I think honestly it's still so solid. So if you're rocking the Weebill S, keep on rocking it. If you're looking for an upgrade, or if you haven't bought one yet and you're looking into getting one of the Weebill series gimbals, then I think the Weebill 3S is worth considering. But I think the Weebill S is still a solid contender if it's something that, you know, if it fits your needs, basically. All in all, those are my thoughts about using the Weebill S versus the 3S. Again, these are like real world thoughts. I'm not going to all the different technical comparisons and like, you know, the motor's increased by like, you know, 5.25% in motor strength. You know, I'm not going to all of that because there's a lot of that kind of stuff on the internet. I just wanted to give you guys my personal take on using these two gimbals, having used this one for 3 years, the Weebill S, and then using the Weebill 3S here for 2 weddings and real estate shoot. And I think that honestly, it's super solid. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and opinions on these gimbals as well, especially if you've used either of them for a long duration of time. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, and all of that. On that note, guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope this was enjoyable. I hope this was helpful. But seriously, if you have thoughts or questions about either of these gimbals, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. If there are things that I missed that are like key features and stuff like that, things that I don't even know about, or if there's the ability to change the ISO, the aperture, the shutter, and all of that from the Weebill 3S without having to go into the menu and change what this scroll wheel does, for example, let me know, because that would be groundbreaking. But all in all, those are my thoughts, guys. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.